Good evening, and we are here tonight, July 20th, 2020, for the start of our workshop session of the Mayor and City Council of College Park. The first item on our agenda is a presentation on the scope of work by Peachtree Government Relations for the 2020 Georgia legislative session and consideration of the renewal of a legislative representation agreement between the City of College Park and PGR. So for that presentation, I'll turn it over to City Manager Terrence Moore to introduce our guests.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So we have in position Mr. Don Bolia and Mr. Howard Franklin representing Peachtree Government Relations. And again, as the Mayor articulated briefly, the purpose of this dialogue is to discuss outcomes and related goals and objectives from the 2020 Georgia legislative session and considerations to continue the professional agreement with the City of College Park, respectively. So this evening's presentation is fairly straightforward and succinct. They also have other colleagues from Peachtree Government Relations accompanying them in their dialogue and presentation. So at this time, I think it would be appropriate to begin with an introductory statement from Mr. Don Bolia, who is the city's principal point of contact representing Peachtree Government Relations. Mr. Don Bolia, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. Appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all today. A very different way of meeting, and hopefully we'll be moving on and one day be meeting face to face. So we definitely look forward to that in the very near future. I'm proud today to have representatives from our team. As you know, when we bid on this contract, we thought a approach of having multiple firms with different backgrounds would bring the most valued representation for the City of College Park. We actually have 3 firms represented here today. As Mr. Moore mentioned, I'm the principal with Peachtree Government Relations. On the call today is Laura Norton, my senior associate, and Brittany Ellison, an associate with PGR. With Thompson Victory Group, we have Matt Ramsey, who is a former legislator in the Georgia General Assembly. He's an attorney, practices on the south side of town, not too far from the City of College Park, and was the former majority whip in the General Assembly, so knows a lot about how the process works and brings a lot of value to our team. We also have Ohio River South, and representing them today is Mr. Howard Franklin, who has really been a very important key part to our team approach to how we have represented you all for the past year plus. So thank you again for the opportunity to represent you in the past, and hopefully we can continue to represent you as we navigate the murky and choppy waters of the General Assembly. And with that, I don't know if we can change to the first slide, or if I have power to move the slides. Okay, there we go. What I thought I'd do today, very briefly, is go through some of the key bills from the 2021 session and talk about some other issues that we'd like to participate in with the City of College Park, and where we think we can add value. Mr. Franklin will be jumping in from time to time as we'll sort of do a 1-2 punch on this presentation. As I mentioned before, we've had the opportunity to represent the city for the last year plus, and we've had a great representation from the city from the mayor, who has spent a lot of time down in the General Assembly, and that has been a huge help in building relationships. Mr. Moore and Mr. Meyer have given us a great deal of the time. I want to also especially thank Jackson for giving us so much of his time. I probably bend his ear at least once a day during the session, and certainly more than that, and we're not in session, I feel like. But we just finished a very unusual 2021 session that ended in June, which is the latest that I have ever heard of a legislative session ending, and I've been doing this for 25 years. So we're coming off the end of the session. Our biggest bill that we worked on was House Bill 443, which was a bill to allow the City of College Park to give a referendum to the voters to potentially choose a MOST, which is a municipal option sales tax for the City of College Park, City of Hapeville, and the City of East Point. We have done a lot of work on this in the past, and you can see from the PowerPoint, we've met with the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, the vice chairman, David Knight, as well. They had a number of concerns about the bill. We think we've answered most of those concerns, and we weren't able to get a bill out of the House. What we did do as a strategic move is we were going to amend a bill in the Senate Finance Committee, We think we had the votes to do that. Senator Thompson, who is in the majority party, was willing to assist us. Senator Jackson, who is in the minority party, was also going to help us on that. We had a bipartisan effort in the Senate Finance Committee to move that bill. What we find is that, we want to make these moves, but not necessarily hurt the city. We felt confident we could get that bill out of the Senate, but when we let the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee know that we were looking at this maneuver, he made it pretty clear that the bill would not move in the House. And what we didn't want to do was ask big favors of our friends in the Senate, only to have the bill die in the House. Chairman Harrell has asked us to look at the bill again in 2021, and has indicated he would give us a helping hand at that time. And I think that's something we'll have to take at face value and continue to work the bill. Next slide, please. And this is just a continuation of that. I do think there are things we can do after the November 2020 elections. I think we need to plan another meeting. We had a very successful meeting with the College Park delegation. We've met with them both in the city of College Park, and Mayor Broome did a great job of coordinating a fantastic meeting with the delegation at the Capitol. I think they were very appreciative of the opportunity to visit with us and listen to citizens. And I think they understand the value and importance of the most tax along with many, many other issues. And so we continue to meet with them. I think we should continue to meet with the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, the Finance Committee. And I think the governor's office is willing to help. They've indicated they believe this is the right issue for us and a good way for the city of College Park to move along a very important infrastructure question for the city. Next slide, please.
Don, can I ask a question while
Yes,
we're
sir.
on that slide? So it sounds like everybody is wanting to help us. What's the hang up?
At this point, it's quite frankly the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. He had concerns about moving the bill this year. I can go into a lot of detail, and that may be something you and I want to discuss, because that takes more than a few minutes to discuss. But I think there were some political concerns. I think that next year, being a non-election year, would have been a little easier to move a bill like that along.
Okay, thank you.
House Bill 779 was a great show of how we can work closely with the Georgia Municipal Association. They took the lead on this. As you know, the way the TAVT tax is levied, it's sort of like throwing darts at a board. They keep changing the numbers, and until the actual revenue comes in, you really don't know whether you were on the upside or the downside. So as they've changed the tax over the years, as you know, about a decade or plus ago, they removed what they call the birthday tax, where you got the tax on an annualized basis, and they levied it all at the beginning when you bought the car to begin with. What we found was, as they moved those numbers around, sometimes the cities did better, sometimes they did worse. And what we've done in this bill is we've moved the percentage that the city gets from that tax from 23% to 28%. So the city of College Park should get a bump, assuming that car sales are either flat or slightly above what they were in 2019. So we're hoping that is a positive thing. We're watching to make sure the governor signs that, but we believe the governor will. Next slide, please. House Bill 302 and Senate Bill 172. We think those were very bad bills for the city of College Park. We've talked about this extensively. Essentially, these are what I call preemption bills. They prohibit the city from certain ordinances that you may want to do. For instance, if you're looking at Airtropolis and you want to have certain design standards, this would have preempted those design standards in favor of a state standard. And we think that's a mistake. We think local control should govern those things. There's a lot of movement on this bill, a lot of powerful players, from the home builders to groups of folks that make and deploy vinyl siding. Those types of design standards that some cities are banning are some of the industry folks that are sort of pushing that bill. We're very successful in working with ACCG, GMA, other cities that we are very closely coordinate with. And even though some very powerful representatives and senators were pushing that bill and some powerful interest groups, we were able to successfully table that bill and make sure it did not move during the 2021 session. Next slide, please. Howard, I don't know if you want to comment on this. You followed it a little closer than I did, but this was another preemption bill.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everybody. Howard Franklin. House Bill 523 was another preemption bill that we also considered a bad bill for the city of College Park. Essentially, what it would have done was preclude the city in its ability to regulate short-term rentals. So, everyone talks quite a bit about the short-term rental boom and how many cities and municipalities have within their city limits short-term rentals that are operating without any formal taxation structure, and oftentimes pose significant challenges in public safety and wear and tear in particular neighborhoods, et cetera, but don't necessarily have a vehicle for paying into the city's coffers or supporting the city services that they take advantage of. And there are a couple dueling efforts to address this issue at the state legislature. But this one in particular, House Bill 523, would have been a bad bill for us because it would have basically said that the city of College Park has no ability and no right to restrict or to regulate and tax those short-term rentals. So we thought that was a bad bill. Again, there were a number of industry insurgents and disruptors who were pushing for passage of this bill. But we thought that ultimately it was a good thing that it was not able to pass in this kind of bifurcated legislative session. Anything you want to add, Don?
Nope, that was perfect.
Well,
Next.
I'll add something
Yes, please.
because I think that this bill is a really good example of this sort of constant attempt from all different sides to kind of strip us of home rule. And what works in College Park may not work in Savannah, may not work in Blue Ridge. And so we have a different set of issues in our city that allow our citizens, our representatives, to make the best decision for College Park. And I know that this is a hot button issue for a lot of people, but ultimately I think the decision about it should come from us and not the legislature. So it was certainly something that I was keeping my eye on, and I'm hopeful that we ultimately come to a conversation in College Park about what works best for us.
Thank you for those comments. Next slide, please. We have, again, I mentioned that Matt Ramsey is an attorney, former whip in the House, and this is a bill that he followed very closely and knows a lot about, and I'll turn it over to Matt to speak to this.
Sure. This is legislation that came about. This is legislation that came about. It's really started at its core to provide liability protection to healthcare providers that are treating COVID, but it ultimately grew over the course of the session to include protections for small businesses, and then ultimately working with GMA and ACCG, local governments and political subdivisions were included. And essentially what it is, it provides a liability shield for entities that are covered by the bill, which does include local governments. If an individual comes on the premises and contracts COVID, the only way the entity is going to be held responsible is if it can be proven that they acted with gross negligence or willful and wanton disregard for the safety of the individuals coming on their premises. It further provides a rebuttable presumption, and you're going to want to work with your city attorney on this. They can get you the exact language. We can provide it as well from the statute when and if the governor signs it. That there's a notice set out in the bill, and it's very specific. It provides the size of the font, and it provides the type of font that you have to use, and it provides, and you have to post a notice on points of entry for the public that is laid out in the bill that states that you're not responsible. You're responsible for making your own decision to come on the premises, and that if you contract COVID, the entity that is hosting the public in that particular venue is not responsible. That creates that rebuttable presumption and creates a liability shield for College Park and small businesses in your community. So it's waiting for the governor to sign it. We hope to hear something soon, and certainly when and if he does sign it, you're going to want to get that. You're going to get that notice on your points of public entry in your local government buildings there.
All right. Any questions on that one for Matt? Next slide, please.
I'll
House
take this
Bill-
one,
Yep.
Don.
absolutely.
House Bill 504, another very interesting bill. It was actually put forward by the Clayton County delegation. And in essence, it would have set up a referendum that would have allowed voters to essentially remove an exemption for ad valorem tax on public properties, namely Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. We were actually, on first blush, very supportive of this legislation because it would have substantially impacted in a positive way the finances of the city of College Park. But we were a bit concerned with the way that it was initially put forward. In large part, it did not seem as if Clayton County had, smoothed the way for us to actually get this piece of legislation through the respective committees and through one or even both of the chambers. And lo and behold, we found out that concern was actually true. So we watched it and monitored it very closely. We talked to advocates both with Clayton County delegation and the city of Atlanta, and a lot of what we heard, a lot of the feedback we heard was very similar. And so I think legislatively, in terms of intent, this is a piece of legislation we'd love to see come back in the 2021 session. But certainly, to the extent that there's opportunity for partnership or to make sure that we've got a smoother path for legislation like this that we know will meet with some opposition, we'll be certain to look for partnership and make sure that we see a real path for this legislation to go forward. So House Bill 504 did not go very far. It got only a hearing. I don't even think it came back for the second hearing that allowed General Manager of the airport, John Selden, to rebut some of the things that the Clayton County delegation put forward in the first hearing. And so I think we're going to definitely have to regroup if we think this legislation has some legs and can go forward in the 2021 session. Any questions?
Next slide, please.
Next slide. And while we're on it, I'll talk a little bit about transportation. Don may jump here as well, but we see ourselves as a full service lobbying advocacy firm. One of the most important investments we see from the infrastructure standpoint is around transportation, and College Park is so strategically situated that we think there's a ton of opportunity for investment in transportation as this community continues to grow and continues to grow its stake as a hospitality and tourism destination in Metro Atlanta and yet across the state. And so we've been active in outreach, in taking meetings, and in finding out about the priorities and trying to sync those up as best we can of organizations like the Atlanta Regional Commission, of tax allocation districts or TADs, and CIDs or community improvement districts, as well as GDOT and the United States Department of Transportation, and especially MARTA. I know that in the last year or so, I think we put an increasing focus on finding additional funds to build the bridge that will connect up the city with the MARTA station that sits right behind City Hall. And that, I think, is an increasing priority that we'll have to certainly continue to monitor in the age of COVID-19, but one that makes a ton of sense economically and from an economic development and from a tourism and travel standpoint. So Don, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to this. I know you took a number of those meetings too.
Only thing I want to add is that as you guys strategically look at the city, and if you're looking at creating a TAD or a CID or growing those, we can be of assistance. We're glad to step in where we can, and where we can set up meetings with your representatives at MARTA or GDOT, we're glad to make that happen as well. So as you're thinking through your strategic plan, we're glad to be a part of it and a part of your method to achieving those dollars. Next, perfect. Economic development. So we certainly enjoy working in this space. I have been involved in economic development for many years. I actually serve as a volunteer as the chair of the DeKalb Development Authority. So we work closely with the state, with GDEC, the state agency that's principally responsible for economic development. We know the folks at Select Fulton very well. We work very closely with them. One thing that's particularly I wanted to bring up about economic development is that the city of College Park does have a state OZ, Opportunity Zone. And that is something I think that we haven't leveraged as well as we can. And it was created roughly 8 years ago. So it expires after 10 years. So the application process to reapply and extend that for another decade really needs to start towards the end of this year and through 21, so it doesn't expire and there's no gaps. But from a marketing standpoint, I don't know how familiar you all are with state opportunity zones, not federal, state. They're very different. The important thing to know about a state opportunity zone is the credits are taken against the employer's withholding tax. What that means is it doesn't cost the city a dime. It's not against property taxes, not against any city revenues. It's 100% against state revenues. So if an employer or employs someone in a state OZ, for every 2 or more new employees that are not that are new to the state, that employer will get a $3,500 per year credit against their withholding taxes for 5 years, or $17,500 per new employee. So you think about 100 jobs being created in College Park, that employer will get $1.75 million against their withholding. And why employers love it so much is that because it's a withholding tax credit, they get it every time they cut a payroll check. So it's great for cash flow for employers. It's great for growth. It gives them the ability to manage cash and cash flow very nicely. And it is the most powerful economic development tool the state has, and they leverage it all the time. I know not far from y'all, I just saw a deal 2 years ago in, I think it's Union City, where they got 1,500 jobs for a facility that was there because of that state OZ. So think about 1,500 jobs times 17,500. That's how much that employer got against their withholding liability. So it's a massive number. It's something that we'd like to help you all market a little better, and certainly want to be a part of the process to either expand and certainly continue the one you have so you don't lose it. Howard, do you want to add anything to economic development?
Not much, except just to say, I think we looked at the map that shows the existing state OZ, and I think Madam Mayor and some others acknowledge that there might be an opportunity to redraw those lines, or to maybe refocus the state OZ in some other places where it looks like development may be taking root. So I did want to mention that, and I think that is a process we should continue.
And I do think it's something that after our conversation, I talked with our economic development department, and I think it is something that they're considering as well. So any assistance they can get on that in the areas that we had already discussed, I think would be super helpful.
Absolutely. We'd love to jump on that immediately. Next slide, please. Howard's going to get this.
Finally, we think that it's important that we have strong relationships both with our sister cities across Fulton County, as well as with the county and its government leadership within which we sit. And a number of issues, I think, have underscored the need for strong relationships, both with with cities that are our neighbors in South Fulton, as well as with our neighbors to the north. I think most recently, we've had a number of discussions and actually reached out to several mayors and got a positive feedback about restarting the mayor's meeting that I think had been interrupted because of COVID-19. Those were, I think, Don, correct me if I'm wrong, I think every 2 months or every other month, meetings of both the county commission leaders and then mayors and city staff from across all of Fulton County's 15 cities. And we just found so many opportunities to work on and to dialogue about the things we did agree on, and to move the ball forward in the space of regionalism. We think that that's a really valuable opportunity that we need to consider extending, even if it's in the virtual realm for the time being. I think another good reason to restart those conversations is just, the conversations that we started to have around the CARES Act funding. Obviously, a lot of detail as legislation was coming out of Congress was being passed on to counties and to cities, and we didn't really have a central forum to talk about the needs of cities, the needs of counties, and how best to divvy up the dollars that were coming from the federal government to make sure everyone was providing as much service as they possibly could and working in coordination as much as possible. We think that addressing CARES Act dollars, especially before the end of the year, when they're required to have been spent or to be sent back to the federal government is an important topic of conversation that we hope to be able to push forward in the next or the upcoming mayor's meeting. And I think there are a number of other conversations around regionalism, transportation investment, transit, and other infrastructure funding that ultimately will improve the lot for the entire region, not just for the city of College Park, but obviously a rising tide lifts all boats. So anything to add, Don?
All I would mention is that in DeKalb County, they actually have a formalized group called the DMA, the DeKalb Municipal Association. And they actually have a former mayor of Decatur that runs the DMA. And I think that was really critical in their ability to convince the DeKalb Board of Commissioners and the CEO in DeKalb to give them what they considered their fair share of CARES Act dollars. In fact, I think the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners took 35%, and the rest was largely divided among the cities within DeKalb County. So in the city I live in the city of Brookhaven, I think they ended up getting somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 or $8 million. So whether that was fair or not is left up for everyone to decide. But I think having a group like the DMA that met on a regular basis gave them a lot more gravitas and a lot more ability to negotiate with DeKalb County than not having that group.
Well, you're aware of our current situation in that Fulton County received $104 million of CARES Act funding and has determined that the 14 cities other than Atlanta in Fulton County have to divvy up $2.5 million of that. And last week, I'm sure you found out somehow, but they've sent a letter to the state asking for the governor to give those 14 cities, ours included, our portion of the CARES Act funding from the state, because essentially Fulton County has said we've spent it all or we've allocated it all. So right now, while every other city in the state outside of those 4 metro Atlanta counties that receive direct funding is getting $174 per person, ours works out to about $4 per person in Fulton County amongst the 500,000 plus residents that live outside the city of Atlanta. So something absolutely has to be done. And I'm more than willing to work with all the mayors in Fulton County to make sure that we're not treated like second-class citizens, because it's unacceptable. Because we are still sitting here trying to figure out how our city recovers from this. And in the meantime, money has been spent without our citizens in mind, and it's extraordinarily frustrating. And we are going to be hearing from the Ferguson Group, and I'm greatly appreciative to Jennifer and the team for allowing me to speak to both of our senators' offices about this as well. But we're still waiting here in College Park. And while other cities have relief and have options and have ways to fill some of the gaps that have been created by this pandemic, we are still waiting. And our citizens are no less deserving than any other across this state.
It's amazing. You were right. And it appears that Fulton County in particular has been zeroed out versus, I know there's ongoing discussions in Cobb. I know Gwinnett has released significant funding, and they intend to release even more funding to cities. And as I mentioned, DeKalb has negotiated their deal. So it seems like Fulton is the odd person out in this whole process. So with that, that's our hopes of how we can continue to work with the city of College Park. Again, we have been so blessed and have so enjoyed our time with the city. Glad to answer any questions you might have for myself or the team here that's available, and certainly hope we can continue to work together.
One of the things, thank you, first of all. Thank you to all of you who've come today and told us about everything and let us know what you've been up to on our behalf. One of the things that I would love to see on the state level is more control for us to regulate fireworks. They've been a big issue this spring and into the summer. And I know that a lot of our citizens are very frustrated, and we're doing what we can on our level. We adopted an ordinance to enact a special use permit for fireworks at our last specially called meeting on July 10th, but we don't have a ton of control based upon the legislation. that is on the books. And I know this has been an issue not only in our city, but throughout the region. So if there could be some movement on that, I would be wholeheartedly in support of it.
I think you and a lot of other mayors feel the exact same way, and that's a great one to get a great coalition on.
Anyone else have anything to add?
No, I just appreciate the work that you guys have been doing for us. I hope we can get the most tax next year. We've been trying for a long time.
Mhm. Absolutely. Anyone else?
I appreciate everything you all do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And Mr. Moore, we are going to be handling the contract during the regular session.
Yes, ma'am. Given the direction or consensus, so to speak, or words of support having just been offered, that would be appropriate.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank
We
you.
were going to move on to the second item on the agenda. It's a federal advocacy update of 2019 to 2020 by the Ferguson Group in consideration of the renewal of a federal lobbying services agreement between the City of College Park and TFG.
So if I may, Madam Mayor, a similar presentation by both Jennifer Emo and Charmaine Anderson representing the Ferguson Group. So from the standpoint of federal lobbying efforts, as well as to have a sense as to the agreement to consider their support and assisting our efforts at that level as well. So Jennifer Emo, Charmaine Anderson, I believe you are with us this evening to offer a brief presentation in terms of where we are, enabling mayor and city council to be familiar with specific tasks, goals, and objectives that are applicable. Ladies, please.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know, can you all see me?
I cannot see you.
Can't
Okay.
see you, Jennifer.
I don't,
We can see Charmaine's picture.
You can? Okay.
We can see your picture, Charmaine, and Jennifer is, just see her name.
okay, I'm sorry.
Just move them both over.
Thank you, Michael.
All right.
Thought that, can you see me now by chance?
Turn your video on.
Start video.
I thought it was.
There we go.
There you
Sorry.
go.
All right. There we go.
Sorry about that. Thank you all, and it's nice to see mayors. Very nice to see your face. We've had a lot of telephone conversations, so I'm glad to put the name of the face. And it's good to see you all. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this evening. I don't know if you received. We did a memo that we put in a PowerPoint format. Is that up? Do you guys have that or not?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So Charmaine and I just would like to take a few minutes to kind of go over some of the action items that we have been working on and, plans for the coming year. As your state lobbyist just said, these are very different times. So I think it's important to be able to pivot and respond to the issues at hand, but not forget what your local priorities are that we've set over the past several years. So the first thing on transportation and infrastructure, I will point out to you all is the work that, if you could just go to the first page, that would be great. It really doesn't matter because I'm just going to talk a little bit about it and summarize it. We are not going to go through it point by point. But anyway, one of the things that we have been working on for quite some time is getting funding for the pedestrian bridge over Camp Creek Parkway. And again, I call it Jackson's Bridge. I don't know that it'll be named as such, but we have really worked hard to get your congressional delegation supportive of this project, such that they are willing to be in contact with the Atlanta Regional Commission and indicate their strong support, since ultimately the funding that goes through ARC is a lot of that is federal funding. So I worked with Jackson and I believe another local contractor in helping to draft the application for construction of the bridge, the $7+ million construction, and actually have a letter of support. We got Jackson had secured a letter of support from Congressman Scott's office, and we worked with Congressman Lewis's office. God rest him. But he signed a letter to Mr. Hooker at ARC in October of 2019, indicating his support for the project. And interestingly, Mr. Lewis historically had not kind of weighed in at the sort of the state decision-making level in the past, but understood the importance of this bridge project, and did in fact lend his support through a letter to ARC in October. Of course, now we've got a transportation reauthorization bill that's it's part of a larger infrastructure package that's passed in the House the beginning of July. It's going to go, the Senate Committee of Jurisdiction, one of the committees of jurisdiction actually has passed their Senate version of the bill for transportation only, surface transportation reauthorization. But now we have a good sense of what's in the House bill, what's in the Senate bill, and we'll be able to really hammer down on what the priorities are for the city of College Park and indicate what those priorities are to your delegation. So there's been a lot going on in transportation and infrastructure. I'm going to pass it over to Charmaine, who handles the law enforcement and public safety work for the city.
And I just want to add also, and just kind of to finish up on the transportation infrastructure, the firm did put out a survey that we were making a request of our municipalities just to kind of get a sense of what those infrastructure priorities were. So we can then keep your congressional delegation informed and aware as these bills move through Congress, and the likelihood that there's opportunities for the city from a resource standpoint. So we appreciate just all the help that we've gotten from the city in that regard to just, again, give us an update of where things are from an infrastructure standpoint, obviously in the transportation world, but then also from a water resource standpoint in other areas where we then can, again, keep the delegation abreast. So if and when there's opportunities that present themselves, we are readily available and have that information at our fingertips. In regards to law enforcement and public safety, obviously we continue to advocate for, increased resources in those program areas that are important to the city, from, the COPS program to FEMA programs that help with not only public safety, but then also fire prevention and staffing. Certainly in this, in the last few months, there has been resources that have kind of come down the pike as far as, helping with, COVID relief, particularly from a public safety standpoint, as far as response. The City of College Park, particularly with the JAG program, which is the Justice Assistance Program, the city's, normal allocation at least for fiscal year 20 was $18,000, but Congress passed where they have a supplemental funding where the city is eligible for $82,000, and information was shared with the police chief about that. So, again, we just want to, continuously keep the city abreast of funding opportunities and resources. And certainly as we move in a space and place as it relates to police reform, we have, kept the city abreast on kind of legislation that's moving through Congress. We also work very closely with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. They have a working group on police reform that includes, not only mayors, but, police chiefs and advisors that are kind of in the mix to help shape policy that's coming out of Congress. So again, we're just continuously keeping you all abreast, and certainly will notify you when best to weigh in. And we certainly see, particularly in the police reform space, that, while the House is, definitely moving a little quicker than the Senate, but that's our normal way of living up here at the federal level. However, we do see, potentially some level of reform legislation coming after the elections. I think it's one of those, as one would say, too close to, as far as a political issue. So a lot of members don't want to bring that, kind of up front and center as we move into the election season. So certainly I do foresee that, something will come about hopefully by the end of the year in regards to that.
And if you could switch to the next page for us. Appreciate it. There has not been a lot of work at this point on energy and environment. Just not that there hasn't been work, but there have not been local priorities that have kind of fit with federal opportunities. We do keep your folks informed of opportunities that are coming out of GFA as well as the federal government. But again, you can't put a square peg in a round hole. And so it's important to make sure that we've got the right projects for the right programs. So I don't have any specific updates on energy and environment other than we continue to monitor opportunities, communicate those opportunities to your staff. And if something hits, then we'll move on it. But you don't want to force it. So Charmaine, if you want to do the community and economic.
And just want to add to that last bit is, as we move with, the infrastructure package that's kind of moving through Congress, the likelihood of additional resources in the environmental space, particularly again in the water resource space, may open itself to opportunities for the city. So certainly we're keeping abreast of kind of, how this bill and how this legislation shapes out so we can certainly inform the city. In the world of community economic development, certainly, we are continuously, advocating for program funding for HUD and the EDA and EPA in particular, as it relates to just new investments and opportunities for the city. Certainly, we were, instrumental in working with the city on the Brownfields grant program. So we're, continuously looking for identifying future resources where monies can be leveraged to kind of continue that, redevelopment process or revitalization process there in the city. Certainly also, in regards to COVID or the coronavirus, response, between the CARES Act and other areas, we've kept the city abreast in regards to homeless funding, CDBG funding, as far as local business resources in regards to the Paycheck, Protection Program, and certainly, in regards to just tourism and hospitality, which I know again is critical there in the city. Working with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and other stakeholders to just kind of get an understanding of just again the impacts to the tourism industry, which is quite large. I also work with some communities on the West Coast who, again, similar to you all, are very, front and center as far as tourism, and the impacts because of COVID are drastic. So again, there is, a push to identify and work through that process as far as tourism. And we're certainly keeping abreast of kind of where things are going with that, whether something happens in the next relief package or in the near future. We'll certainly keep you abreast. In regards to, there was some emergency solution grant monies that became available because the City of College Park's a non-entitlement community. Those resources are available through the state, which we provided information on. There was a pool of $15 million back in April. It's my understanding that there was another chunk of money, I think another 15 to maybe 30 million back in June. So again, those monies are available. It does help, particularly in the space of just allowing for more housing and kind of homeless prevention, homeless assistance, and things of that sort. Certainly, if there's additional information you all want on that, we can share that. The other thing I wanted to bring light to, which some of your state reps mentioned, in regards to short-term rentals, that is a big issue that has kind of surfaced, particularly among municipalities, and how do you deal with, whether it's, again, as your state reps mentioned, zoning and occupancy issues. So it hasn't kind of bubbled to a huge point of awareness, but it is something that, a lot of municipalities are paying attention to and wanting some direction and relief from, or just, again, we are keeping abreast of those type of issues. And then also in regards to COVID, liability protections that were mentioned by your state reps, I can tell you that the Senate, which, again, as you all may know from just our updates, the HEROES Act was passed by the House. The Senate, which is like a $3 trillion bill, which includes direct allocations for state and local governments, particularly those local governments like yourselves that are under that 500,000 population threshold. But the Senate has not, and we're just hearing now that the Senate is looking to put together a $1 trillion bill, which would include liability protections for schools and universities and businesses and churches, from what the Senate Majority Leader has mentioned, in regards to their reopening. So again, we're starting to feel like, again, a lot of things are moving in a very political fashion because, again, we're about 100 days out from the election. So we'll keep abreast of those type of issues, knowing now that those are key issues that have been brought up, that you all are working on stateside. And certainly it's definitely an issue. Those issues are certainly issues that have been raised by other municipalities around the country. And certainly, again, with the HEROES Act, we are part of a large, advocacy stakeholder groups between the Conference of Mayors, the League of Cities, the National Association of Counties, a large stakeholder group, and where, we're pushing members, and we're being very strategic now, working on the Senate side and identifying senators, particularly the Republicans, who can help make sure that there are direct fundings for local communities like yourselves. And, as you all mentioned, again, just about Fulton County and kind of being left out, I can tell you, and it's one of those where you're in the, as we always just say, you're kind of in the shadows of Atlanta, as one would like to say sometimes. You're not alone, because we're finding that communities where there are really big cities, I work with a community that's in the shadows of Los Angeles. And the same thing, Mayor, they have been given nothing. So they've been directed to go to their state, and the states are now, prioritizing, and pretty much money's coming from nowhere. So that, again, there's a lot of communities like yourselves pushing for that direct funding allocation, because certainly, we're making that case about just the impacts economically, not only just from, dealing with COVID impacts, but all things impact. And as you all are a tourist destination and other things that you all are, striving to work with your community with, we are certainly striving to and pushing hard to get members of Congress to move forward and get a bill done. Certainly, before if not before they go out in August recess, certainly when they get back in September, to get local monies to you all directly.
So I had a question.
please.
You said the ESG funds were through the state. I thought they'd be through Fulton County, as they are our.
Fulton County, the state also has a pool, and it's from the non-entitlements go through states.
Mm-hmm.
And I can provide the contact names that were provided to me through the state of Georgia,
because they are our entitlement.
Fulton County is an entitlement, which you can obviously have,
right.
Monies are available there, but then there's also a pool of resources that are available through the state.
Which gives non-entitlement communities kind of a competitive opportunity to access some of those funds.
I didn't think that we could do both.
I will confirm that, Mayor, and get back to you.
Jackson, can you? I know that you are not even on camera and you're muted, but.
We can't do both. We either choose Georgia or we choose Fulton County.
Okay.
So
Yes,
are
and
you
if we
getting-
wanted to, we'd be competitive throughout the whole state, from Valdosta to everywhere.
Right.
So you are getting ESG dollars from Fulton County? Okay, so that's why you can't do that. I see.
Yep.
Mhm. Okay. If you could just go down, I think, to sort of the infographic that we did. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, right here. So this just, and we'll just finish off with this, but as part of, we have been very strongly advocating, especially to Senate Republicans, on the need for additional state and local aid in the next relief package. And we expect that the Senate Republican leadership is going to unveil. I know it's been sent to the president already. Things have been leaked a little bit, but we have not seen the first version of this new bill. But there is this week going to be unveiled the Senate Republican package. Whether or not it includes state or local aid, I'm not 100% sure. There are rumors that there is state and local aid only if it's tied to education. But we don't know. We haven't seen it. But the whole reason then why we set up the meetings that you talked about, Mayor Broome, was because, with your two senators, it was very important for them to get to understand the data and where your what the actual impacts are, how you're working with Fulton County. I mean, and you may recall in that call that we had with staff from both Senate offices, they were like audibly surprised that you had received absolutely nothing from Fulton County. So it is very important. They can they can have sort of these large conceptual ideas of what's best to be included in a relief package, but until they get that very specific data from you all, they're not going to be pushing for something that may not be their, kind of their, a political push for them, right? Liability protections for employers, even municipal employers, is definitely going to be included in this bill. We certainly hope it'll be additional state and local aid. I've also heard, there's been a lot of support for making the coronavirus relief funds more flexible, so they can actually address revenue loss that doesn't have to necessarily be tied to COVID response. But I think, and if you could just go down to the last slide for me, and then we provided them with all this data, and then followed up with here are our requests as a result. Look at our data, and here are our requests. So I think it's very important. Thank you for your time and having those calls. All this information has been sent to staff on multiple occasions as well, just to make sure it's in front of them. But as this next relief package comes out, we will, we are on top of it. We will continue to communicate with your delegation to ensure that they remember exactly what the impacts are on College Park, and take that into account when they're pushing, hopefully, for additional state and local aid. So,
and I think also to point out, Mayor and Council, one of the most unique things too about College Park, unlike a number of communities around the country, is you have your own police and fire. And so because you have those first responders who are responding to all sorts of different types of emergencies there in the community, and obviously with COVID, so certainly it makes you unique in the sense that direct aid is critical. So we're certainly making sure that members of Congress are aware of that, because again, you all have frontline workers that are really doing their due diligence about how to protect your community and the surrounding areas.
I think, guys, that we've been hit in so many areas. I mean, we are unique in that we are a very complex city. And I passed along one comment to you. I think you're low on the count of hotels, for example, that we had on your information sheet. And I'm sure Terrence can clarify that for you. I took a guess at the number, but we've been hit in the tourism industry. We're a business. We've been hit in the utility industry because we have a power company in addition to the water and sewer. And we're hit, as you point out, in the fact that we do our own police and fire here, unlike some cities that are dependent on the county for those services. So there isn't really much aspect of COVID that isn't affecting us, whereas different cities have been hit by one or possibly two, but we're hit in all three areas.
Correct. Absolutely, Councilman.
And that's why, if you'll go back up, I'm sorry, if you'll go up 2 slides, I mean, that's this one. I mean, that's why we put that out there for the staff to see. They need to understand, okay, you know what? Again, this is a small, you're a small city from a residential population perspective, but such a huge impact. I mean, that's what makes, and I think we talked about that a lot, Mayor, when we were on the phone. College Park is so unique in that you've got, you're such small by the numbers, but very large on impact.
I say all the time, we punch above our weight.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yes.
Well, ladies, anything else to add?
I would just like to thank you guys again on your efforts in securing the Brownfield grant. I know we took a role in that as well, but that was an amazing coup. I couldn't have been prouder when I attended the meeting over in East Point where those grants were awarded.
And we hope to do more of that, because I know, just working with Artie and the economic development folks, just, revitalizing that area, just, again, we hope to bring in more federal resources to continue that effort.
All right. Anyone else have anything to add?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
So this will likewise be offered for consideration as part of the regular meeting. So with consensus to proceed in that regard, much like with Peachtree Government Relations, the opportunity to offer due consideration relative to the Ferguson Group is being made available.
Good.
All right.
Well, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your partnership. These have been very interesting times, but we hope to continue to shepherd you through them. We thank you all very much.
All right.
And we remain hopeful, certainly, as we move into a new season of, the fall into the new year of 2021, as far as additional opportunities that we will work to secure and support the city.
Fantastic. We appreciate your efforts.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay healthy.
Hey, you do
You
the
guys
same. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
All right. And we have one additional item to the workshop agenda, and it's going to be discussion of the process surrounding distribution of anticipated CDBG funds for utilities and rent assistance. And this was a late addition by me because we need to have a bit of a discussion about where we are with this. We are hopeful that we might get some assistance from the county in regard to utility and rent assistance for our citizens. However, the process by which we either administer or send that to another group to administer is something that we need to discuss. And I thought that prior to the county making that determination, we should flesh things out on a little bit of a broader basis. So I'm going to ask Jackson Myers to sort of give us a little bit of a perspective about where we are with the situation at this point, and where we are headed.
Good evening. Ms. Bradley, you on the line too? anyway, basically they'd asked us for some COVID-19 application. Fulton County did, and sent it down and told us that we had to have it done over the 4th of July holidays. So we hurried up and did some scrambling around and came up with some ideas for the COVID-19. And I talked to the state lobbyists what we could do to help with some of those ideas. We went ahead and put in for, then I ended up asking them at the end of the day, I said, how about utilities? Because it wasn't on their list at all. We didn't have any kind of utilities for the COVID-19. So they did come back and say, okay, utilities, we can be utilized along with mortgage and lease. So that's what I put in. So first I put in, didn't know how much the various cities were going to ask for. So I asked for 250,000. Then I found out that only 4 cities actually put into it. So I asked for $500,000. So with that being said, since we were one of the only 4 cities that put it in and asked for $500,000, then it's supposed to be on the Board of Commissions on Wednesday. So anyway, with that being said, I think the question was that I wanted to lead up to it. I'm sorry. I wanted to lead up to how it got to where it got to be. Anyway, so then that we went back and forth with CDGB, and that they said that we needed to have an outside source, and then we said like a nonprofit 501. Then they turned around and said we could do it in-house. And then Miss Bradley and we talked to them, and if we could dedicate one person to the project, because it takes a lot of paperwork. We've got to get their tax returns, either a W-2, 1099. There's a lot of paperwork involved in it. I'll stop right there.
I think Ms. Bradley, Ms. Fleur Bradley, is going to be joining us if she hasn't already. Mr. Hicks, do you see her?
No, I do not. I'll reach out. If you,
okay. All right.
Oh, stand by. Hold on a second. I see her now. She just joined.
All right. Thank you.
Just move her over.
There she is. Miss Fleur Bradley, if you could unmute when you get the opportunity.
Yes, ma'am. I'm here.
Hello. How are you?
Good. Hello.
Mr. Myers just sort of brought us up to speed about the request that's been made of the county for $500,000 to assist with utility payments, and the fact that we can administer it ourselves if we have one person devoted to it. That's kind of where he left off.
That is correct. Or we can subcontract it out with a third party. We would have to go out with a bid to solicit the agencies that would administer the program. But we have 2 options, and that is devoting one person to the program or subcontracting it out and through the RFP process. And we have both options.
All right. So if we did use one person and devoted them to this process, do we have a person available for that who could devote that time?
We would actually have to contract a person, because they would, from what my understanding is, it's almost like a case management type position. And we would have to contract that and have a contract position.
But that wouldn't be contracting it out to a firm. That would be hiring a contract worker.
Yes, sir. And they would be fully covered by the grant proceeds.
So they would detract from the proceeds as well, right?
Yes, sir.
So regardless of whether we contract out with a 501c3 or if we were to contract with a particular individual to handle it, we would see some level of funds drop off from that 500,000.
Right.
Exactly.
Now, if we were in either of those 2 cases, how soon could we get this up and running?
Well, from my understanding, we have to advertise it. If we went with a 501c3, that we'd have to advertise. We'd have to advertise a minimum of 2 weeks.
Okay, you have to advertise for 2 weeks, and you have to evaluate, right?
Yes. That's
And then-
part of the
And
CDGB.
council has to vote, I presume, approve it.
Correct.
Okay, and if we just go and hire in a contractor, how soon can we do that?
As soon as the program is approved and council approves the direction.
Well, the program is virtually ready to be approved, is it not?
Well,
Wednesday?
yeah, Wednesday, the commissioners are
Wednesday.
gonna.
Right.
So that's why I wanted to add it tonight, so we could have a conversation about how, so we are ready from,
So we
once
could-
they approve it, we're ready to run with it,
And we
however
can,
we want to take it.
and we could approve tonight to go ahead with the contractor, subject to them approving the program.
Right.
So if I may, ladies and gentlemen, the recommendation would be to offer consensus to engage a contractor selection process with the proviso that the program is approved. That way we can bring back a specific recommendation at either the August 3rd, if not August 17th regular meeting.
Are you, when you say contractor, are you referring to a bid process, or are you referring to hiring in a contract worker to do this program?
A selection process that both Jackson Myers and Althea Lord just talked about. Somebody who would come in from the outside to administer the program on our behalf. Because the financial consideration in all likelihood will exceed $10,000, and so I would ask for council's approval.
Right, but we're talking about one individual, not hiring.
Instead of an organization.
That's correct, an individual contract agent.
Okay,
So the request then is to offer consensus to that effect. We will then proceed in the next couple of days or so to initiate a formal selection process for an individual contractor, not a firm, but an individual. And once we complete that process with the proviso that the program is formally approved, a recommendation for your review and consideration will be offered publicly.
okay,
Does that work for the body?
sounds good to me.
I got a
I
question.
wish it'd be
Wait,
sooner.
hold on. Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. We're getting a little bit of feedback, and I think Councilman Allen and Councilman Taylor were starting to talk at the same time.
Go
So,
ahead, Taylor.
Councilman Taylor, the floor is yours.
Okay, I got a question. Can we just use Ignite for this? Ain't that the same sort of thing they're doing for us already?
Well, from my understanding, with the grant, because of the amount of the grant, we would have to solicit for bids, regardless of whether or not we have a current contract. Because the contract we currently have with Ignite, we did not go through the RFP process, and they're going to require with the grant amount that we go through that process. We just can't give it to a 501(c)(3). They have to put in a bid for it.
So that was my original suggestion, Councilman Taylor, that we just use the mechanism that we already have in place, which isn't doing exactly the same thing, mind you. But for the reasons that have been mentioned, we have to go through a more lengthy process if we do that. This would get it on board quickly.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Gay, anything from you?
I like well, first of all, congratulations to all those that worked on that. Congratulations. I like the contract person coming into in-house and working on it.
Okay. All right. Councilman Allen, I'm sorry. You had something to say and I skipped over you and I apologize.
No, I was just going to say it can't be soon enough for me. I wish we could move it along a little faster, but I understand what it is, and if we can have everybody ready to go, we can speed it up at the next meeting.
Amen.
Ms. Flord Bradley, can you explain the process by which, so if we bring in an individual in, and would that person be paid by each grant that they process, a certain percentage, or how would that come together?
It would be an hourly wage.
Okay.
We would pay that person an hourly wage, so it wouldn't be based on the number of applications that are processed. Now, if we brought in a 501(c)(3), we could do it based on the number of applications that are actually processed. Yes.
But you're
Not the
going to get a
applications,
bunch.
but the application amounts, because there is a percentage that you can dedicate towards the 501(c)(3) versus the contract employee.
There are going to be a lot of them, I think.
I think so as well. I don't think we're going to have any problem.
I might add that this is a win-win.
Absolutely.
A win for our residents and a win for the city, because ultimately we are the recipient of the money that the citizens bequeath to us through this process. Good work by all.
Well, Miss Flora Bradley and Mr. Myers, what would be the timeline if we did do a bid process or an RFQ or RFP process?
I would say that it'd be tight coming up on by the next council meeting, because we have to wait till Wednesday to make sure we're on board with. Yeah.
Well, if we get some direction tonight as far as how the council wants us to proceed, if you want us to go with a contract employee or a solicitor 501(c), if it gets approved Wednesday, I believe that RFP is ready to go, Jackson.
Yes, it's
And-
ready to go.
Yeah, so that
So
has
we
to be.
could go out Friday.
Exactly.
So that's we have to have the bid out open for 2 weeks.
Yes, sir.
And then how long does it take to evaluate that?
Staff, we'll be able to do that in a couple of days.
Okay, so say 2.5 weeks,
About 3 weeks.
And-
Yeah.
about 3 weeks. Okay, 3 weeks. And if it goes out Friday, that
So at the
means
earliest, we're looking at August 17th city council meeting.
Correct.
August 17 for approval of
Yes,
the organization.
yes.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Whereas if we go with a contract employee brought in, we could literally start on maybe by the end of this week. True?
But we would have to interview.
I don't know who they would be.
Yeah.
I mean, we still have to put out a,
Had to vent them.
yeah.
I assume you go through a temp, you go through a temp agency like
Yes, we can.
And a temp agency, at least my experience has been in business, has been within a couple of 3 days, you can have someone on the payroll.
It'll take about a week to get someone on the
week,
payroll.
Yes.
So we're talking about a gain of
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Then we might make it the next council meeting. Close.
Well, at that point, the person's already
Yeah.
up
yeah,
and
we-
running.
Yeah, we would.
We wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, we won't have anything to do with the selection of the person, so it wouldn't have to come back to us for that. We just approve it tonight to go ahead and do it, subject to the county going along with it.
And you all's consensus will suffice in that regard so that we can proceed administratively.
All right. Is there consensus from the group?
Amen.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
go along with that temporarily.
Okay. All right. All right. That sounds like consensus to me.
I'm sorry, can I just get a clear consensus that we're going to move forward with? I didn't get it, I'm sorry.
My amen means yes.
Yes, for me.
Councilman Taylor?
I said yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Ms. Moore, you're good?
No, I'm not. What
Okay.
was the consensus?
The consensus is to move forward with a contract temporary employee to administer.
Gotcha, okay. I'm good, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So that is all that our workshop session has to deal with. We've got about 13 minutes before the regular meeting starts. And so, gentlemen, can I get a motion to re-enter executive session?
So moved.
All right. For the purposes of real estate litigation and personnel?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, yes.
Councilman Allen seconding that. Mr. Young, can you put your phone on mute? Because I think that, or there we go. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. So let's go ahead and I'll meet you at that link, and we will be back at 7:30. Thank you.